Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Soundbites.
Hello, Siberia. Let's turn this lecture hall into a rock and roll concert. That's right. Well, I backed up my data. Well, I backed it up to the drive. Oh, but I'm so mad, it's backing up so slow. You know I hate when it's so slow. Try to back my data up to the drive. I know I'll never see my work again. Calling out for support. You know I'm calling, oh I'm calling out for support. Call the IT department, trying to get some damn support. Now I'm still here, waiting on the line. Calling hard drive crash. Someone else to blame. Lost my data, looking for someone else to blame. But I won't switch to Mac just to say, had a hard drive crash. Gentlemen, please welcome the host of the Cyber Summit Talk Show, Ingram. Had a hard drive crash. The Soundbites, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so this is, as you can probably already tell, going to be a somewhat unique meeting for a kind of IT, cloudy sort of group, data miners, data scientists. So here's how it's going to go. It's a talk show. Witness the talk show set to my left.
We have 4 guests, which is that's a hell of a lot for a talk show, if you ask me. And we know that you're all into, big data, things like, Walmart processes 1 million transactions every hour. I'm sure you know all this, but it's kind of my job to introduce the idea. When the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope comes online in 2016, it's going to collect in 5 days as much data as all astronomy has ever collected in the history of astronomy. And, it's the speed and the cost of information has increased so rapidly since the 60s that it's as if a house that cost $1 million in 1964 could be bought today for a nickel. And if life expectancy had been reduced from 75 years to 4 minutes. Now, I'm not a big data expert, but I know a guy who is, John Rennie. He is the John of the Jay and John talk show. He was executive editor of Scientific American magazine for 15 years. And he's joining us tonight. Unfortunately, can't actually be here. He emailed me earlier today and said he's going to be in some dank, palmetto bug-infested motel in Miami, Florida. However, he was smart enough to record some comments, and so he's going to come to us virtually on the screen behind me, which at this meeting, that's perfect, right? He's really just a data package, not really a human being. But he is a human being / data package that knows something about everything, and I'm convinced he's going to have enlightening things to say about big data. So we're ready to hear from John Rennie. Take it away, John.
Hi, Jay. Say, I was hoping maybe you could help me with a little problem I'm having. How many jelly beans do you think I have in this glass? It turns out that this sort of problem, one of counting what's very difficult to count, has been around for quite some time. In fact, it was just a little bit over 100 years ago that the great British scientist Francis Galton went to a county fair, and he saw some people who were trying to estimate the weight of an ox. And he realized that if he took the arithmetic mean of all the guesses they were making, that number was astonishingly accurate. That gave rise to this idea of the wisdom of crowds, the idea that if you knew the right kind of question to ask, sometimes everybody collectively could be smarter than anybody individually. It's an idea that has started to show up in a lot of places, including popular culture. I know you're a big fan of the show Breaking Bad, and it had some relevance to a situation there not too long ago when some of the characters went into a storage locker and found that they had an enormous amount of money sitting there that they had earned by, spoiler alert, selling meth.
This is not meth.
It was so much money that they said they couldn't even count it. But it turns out that it still wasn't too much to estimate. And in fact, somebody on the website Quora made a great guess at what that might be, based on the size of the bales of money and the probable nature of the denominations of the bills that would have been in there. He came to the conclusion that it was most likely that fictional Walter White had somewhere between $17.5 and $43.9 million in that storage locker.
Who are you talking to right now?
However, Walter White is just a piker compared to some fictional moneybags, perhaps chief among them the great Scrooge McDuck, who had so much money that he could just go down into his vault and it was filled with gold coins and he could swim around in it. Now, we don't really know how much money that was, but somebody at the Billfold earlier this year took a stab at estimating how much it was, and based on the actual, the price of gold and the probable dimensions of that vault, came to the conclusion that Scrooge was probably swimming around in something like $31.2 billion worth of gold. Not too bad as a well-heeled waterfowl might go. However, not all of us have those kinds of problems. Some of us, faced with our own uncountable problems, we just have to attack them in the old-fashioned way. 1, 2, 3, talk to you later. 4, 5.
So John knew that we had a much more challenging jelly bean issue here, a much bigger container that really it would not make sense to try and eat them and count them at the same time. So I do have a reminder at this point for all of you who think you know exactly the number of jelly beans. We need you to make sure that your ballot is filled out over the next couple of minutes because they're going to be picked up in a little while. But in the meantime, I'd like to introduce our first guest. You were all, from what I hear, enthralled by his plenary lecture this morning, Andrew Hessel. He is many things beyond the guy who told you about using DNA and living cells to calculate. So please welcome Andrew Hessel. So Andrew and I chatted briefly before the show to try and think about what we should talk about in our 8 to 10 minutes here. And he's a multifaceted guy who has been to Burning Man many times. He's on faculty at Singularity University, which seems to me, if you go to Singularity University, you enroll, but you never, ever get out. So tell me about Singularity University.
Well, Singularity started out really because there was a group of people organizing it and I found out about. And I just said, I have to be a part of that. I've been working with the universities here in Alberta. I was having a tremendous time trying to get them organized and really learning a lot of things. And the opportunity to build a university was just so exciting. I said, I have to do this.
So what sets it apart from traditional universities?
It's not backwards looking at all. It's completely looking forwards, and with the idea that some of these technologies are changing so quickly. In a 4-year degree program, if knowledge is changing exponentially and literally doubling every 2 years, you're almost running behind the curve. So part of the university's focus is how do you teach people to understand where they are, but to project a little bit into the future so that you can actually be waiting for the technology curves to catch up to you.
Do they have a football team?
No, it's all robots.
But very well coached. So give me a sense of, if I'm a student, why would I consider going there? And what sort of student would I be to be able to get in?
Well, I've worked largely with the executive program. So we have each executive program is about 80 people like yourselves that are all generally from different industries, not any one particular vertical. About 25% come from finance, the rest from all these different industries. And what a lot of industry is starting to realize is that things are happening faster now. So they come and organize at Singularity, and in about a 7-day program, we give them a really fast run through on everything from robotics, networking, computing, biotech, space, and really open their minds to the changes. They get to meet most of the players that are really key. We're located at NASA Ames, which is in the heart of Silicon Valley. Google is our neighbor. NASA, of course, is always at the forefront of space technologies. And around us is Facebook and literally most of the social media companies that have emerged in the last few years.
So how do you, as an individual, and you're on faculty there, and you've acknowledged, and I think we've acknowledged today, that things are moving incredibly quickly on a number of fronts. So what do you do to keep up? How can you reassure yourself that you actually are there at the cutting edge so that you can inform people coming in, what's going on?
A lot of it is just knowledge processing. We're constantly reading. We're constantly being exposed to the new technologies. People come to us all the time and say, can we present at Singularity University? So really, most of it is I don't actually work a real job. I'm sitting there processing a lot of the information and knowledge that you wish you had time to read while you were at work.
Now, you also have adopted a nomadic lifestyle, at least the North American version of that. Tell me about that.
So it started out about 5 years ago. I just started traveling to start sharing some of these stories around genetic technologies and what was happening. I was doing it in Alberta for 2007 and 2008, and then working with industry in Alberta quite a bit and in the rest of Canada. But by 2009, I realized I can't keep up with this. With really staying on the road. There's no point in going home. So I sold everything and now I live out of just I have a little bag that I call the football, which has my computer, my laptop, and a few little things I need for connecting to projection systems, and a little bag of clothes, and I've been doing that for about 3 years now.
So where do you stay?
Well, for the most part, I have a really large network of friends now. I'm doing anywhere from 50 or 60 talks a year, so if I come in and spend a couple of days there, that's about a third of the year immediately off the top. Travel usually takes a little bit of it, so I like to joke that I live in Air Canada lounges. It's not that far from the truth. And then a little bit of hotels. Hotels are getting really easy to book online, and I'm always looking ahead.
You know, so I think most of us have possessions that we like to keep. Have you seemed, unless you put them in storage somewhere, you've shed all those, right?
Yeah, pretty much everything. I live a digital lifestyle now.
Was that difficult?
It was really hard getting rid of the stuff that you think you're supposed to keep, you know, the stuff family members give you, yearbooks, photographs, and I just found that digitizing the stuff that was really important was good. For about 5 years, I've said to family and friends, don't buy me anything that I can't wear, and really that can't travel around with me. So I really like small mementos, but yeah, it was really a transition, giving up on all the physical stuff, but once you do it, you feel so free.
Now, do you think that having adopted this lifestyle has impacted the science you do, or even the way you think about the science?
It makes it really easy to keep up with the rate of change. And again, we're living in this era of big data with a lot of groups that are also working collaboratively around the world. I think it allows me to go and connect with people in ways that would be impossible if I was always working out of one institution. So I get to go and build bridges with a lot of different groups, see them on their home turf, learn a little about their cities, learn a little about their schools, and try and connect them back. So I was lucky to connect people back to Singularity University for the last few years, and that's become a real hub, almost a family. I don't know the exact number of people that have come through since they started in 2009, but it's probably over 5,000 people now that are part of the family. And more recently with Autodesk, this is a global corporation that I can go and say, you know, let's start building a group of people with similar interests.
So what would you say, Andrew, I mean, if you had to describe your job, what would you say?
I've had a lot of trouble doing that, Jay. I've called myself a catalyst because I really do like building bridges and seeing something emerge from that. So really like an enzyme, trying to take two chemical compounds and making a new one out of it. In some ways, I've described myself as a futurist, and that's because I met a futurist for Intel, a guy named Brian David Johnson. He's the only on-staff futurist for the Intel Corporation. And he said, Andrew, you live in the future. You're always thinking about the future. That works, except that there's this aversion to the idea of being a futurist. It didn't sit well on me, but I tried it at customs a number of times. When I crossed the border, they'd say, what do you do for a living? I said, I'm a futurist. And they'd go, well, what does that involve? And it's like, oh, thinking about the future. So I've tried this
Immediately suspicious.
Yeah, but the funny thing is they said, that sounds cool. So really I describe myself as a microbiologist and geneticist because that's my first love, but really a lot of the times I'm a storyteller. Most of all, I really want to see people go and explore these technologies, teach their kids about it, and start working in the area.
Now, I have to confess, excuse me, I'm skeptical about futurism as a general thing. I do think it's storytelling, but I've never really been convinced that there's anybody out there that can make concrete predictions about what's going to happen in, say, 5 or 10 years. But I may be taking too narrow a view of what futurism is. So what do you see it as?
Well, I look at it this way. I'm really bad at predicting specific events in the future, but I know that two things are happening. Computers are expanding. We're putting them everywhere. The Internet of Things. So computing in general is growing. The amount of data we're generating is growing. And in general, the amount of computing power you get per dollar is increasing. So computers everywhere. that's a pretty much a sure bet. I'm not going to bet against that. So that's partly what I like to look into the future about. And the other one is genetics. And genetics, for me, is a type of computing and programming language. And so I just think that genetic engineering is going to follow many of the same trends as computing. So sometimes when I'm over in Europe, I'll say to people, who here is against genetic engineering? And hands will go up against, all around the room, and I'll say, prepare to be disappointed. And I'm absolutely serious. More and more people are going to get into this field. More and more things are going to be explored. And for the vast majority of things that people are doing, they'll be good. And we'll start to see more and more press around this in the years to come.
Now, how do you or can you factor in elements of the future that don't address what you've just said directly, like climate change? Are you able to look at that and say, well, if I were a climatologist, I'd be looking at the future with a lot of trepidation, but I'm confident about genetics, and computers. Do those intersect in your mind, or are you focused on the genetics and computers, and climate change will happen in some way?
So we've been changing our world ever since we started to industrialize. We know that. And it's accelerating more. I think climate change is a really good way to look at it. They used to call it global warming, and then but we really are changing our ecosystems, and I think that's entirely true, accurate, and I think we'll keep changing it. The two things that I see really that is so remarkable in this century is one, if you just graph out the growth of computing, somewhere around mid-century, computers become the most powerful processors on the planet. You can kind of estimate the amount of computational cycles each human has and multiply it by about 9 billion, the estimated population in mid-century, and that's a lot of compute cycles. But the way the electronic systems are growing, they surpass that. And these computers are embedded everywhere. So somewhere mid-century, computers really have more brain power than we do, and that's kind of remarkable. And then there's this other thing that we're starting to manipulate genetic code faster and cheaper, and although we're really slow at it now, we saw how fast sequencing dropped in price and how capable we are doing that. By mid-century, we've sequenced almost everything on the planet, every organism that we've ever found, and we're getting really good at writing the stuff. And that means we have to really take ownership of evolution, because now we get input into that process. I think these are really some of the most powerful and remarkable things that could ever happen to humanity, and they're going to basically coalesce within a few decades of each other. But when you look at it, computing and biotech have been kind of racing side by side. Transistor in 1947, discovery of DNA in 53. Really the industries seem to be kind of driving us towards this convergence.
It's fascinating ideas. Thanks a lot, Andrew.
Thank you, Jay.
Really appreciate it. Andrew Hessel, ladies and gentlemen. That was great. I was just going to say to the band, keep playing. But anyway, hold it. It's time now to pick up the ballots that have been filled out. So we're going to send actual human beings around to the room to pick up ballots. Anybody who thinks they have a pretty good estimate. Yeah. estimates are being counted at the moment, but in the meantime, I'd like to welcome our second guest, who many of you heard speak already today, fascinating woman. Please welcome Rachel Binks.
I think it's on. Try it.
Hooray.
Yeah, I think it.
What is?
Yeah.
Ah, I just
Yeah, it's
can't
good.
hear myself.
So Rachel has really, really wide interests, all of which deal with doing something interesting with data, visualizing it. And so we have a number of things that we want to talk about that I hope will give you an idea of the breadth of the stuff that she does. And the first one actually has to do with jewelry, and it's called meshu. So what is meshu?
Well, meshu turns your places into beautiful objects. So the idea is to take location data, and you can input it on a map, and then we sort of triangulate the points, and you wind up with a shape that you can either turn into laser cut or 3D printed jewelry.
So let's take a look at some examples.
Sounds great. So this is countries in South America. Map and bamboo earrings. And we created a couple of sort of ready-mades to put on the site just to show people sort of what's possible to do with these algorithms. But it's been really amazing to see the more personal stories that people have made, because it's actually quite wonderful. No one has bought these earrings, and that's great. I would be really sad if people only wanted to buy off-the-shelf earrings, but they'd much rather make their own and use their own data, which is a lot better, I think.
Because you'd be buying somebody else's voyage.
Totally.
Okay, and some more?
So this is actually a trip that I took to Las Vegas. These are all the restaurants and bars and clubs that I went to. Pretty awesome trip. It's okay. But yeah, so there's the map on the right with all the different points, and everything's listed out on the left. We also have Foursquare and Facebook integration. So these are actually Foursquare check-ins that I did all through Vegas.
And are they usually made into earrings?
I think actually necklaces are our most popular form.
What are you wearing right now?
I'm currently wearing a trip that I took to Iceland with my partner. So it starts in Reykjavik, and then we drove along the southern coast.
And what's it made of?
This is currently made of, it's made out of acrylic, white acrylic. So we offer bamboo wood, acrylic in black and white, 3D printed nylon, and 3D printed silver.
There's a good variety. The Vegas one we saw, the Reykjavik one you're wearing, is that the same one, the one you're wearing?
No, they're different check-ins, because I have Verizon, who doesn't have data over in Iceland. That's okay.
The Pittsburgh one is kind of straightforward.
Yeah, it turns out that airports are usually far away from city centers, and I tend to go from the airport to the city center, and so it's usually pretty stretched out.
So what inspired you to do this?
Well, both Shaw and myself are data visualizers and interested in data and mapping, and we kind of wanted to do a project together, and it just sort of came very naturally, thinking about sort of cities and physical objects. It's nice to make jewelry because people wear it, and it's a personal object versus something that might just sit on a shelf. So yeah, we just sort of brainstormed for a couple hours and then came up with, like, what does the landscape of a city or a country or, a trip or all these sort of physical experiences, and how to turn that into an object that you might wear.
It reminds me of things that were more popular like decades ago, but charm bracelets, where you'd pick up a little memento of whatever place you'd been. But this is much more detailed and kind of a detailed record of a trip.
Yeah, I also like it because it's sort of abstract. Like, you can definitely wear it and not have to explain to everyone, oh, well, this is my trip to Iceland. But, if you actually want to share that story with someone, then, it's very easy to talk about it. It's sort of private. I like that.
So just extrapolating from this a little bit, because this is a kind of personal record, made into an object. But I know that you've been interested, at least in the past and maybe still, about sort of keeping personal records and tracking yourself personally. And I've just been actually reading a book by a Canadian author who's written a lot about this. And tell me, like, why were you interested? We'll have a look at it in a sec, I think, but why were you interested in tracking your personal history?
It's sort of funny. That project started when I sort of had this calling to do data visualization, and was really excited about the field and wanted to start visualizing data, but didn't have any data. So I created some. It's really easy to make your own data about yourself. So yes, I called this the Hourly Binks project, and I basically, for every hour of every day for 50 days, I recorded my happiness and my energy levels. So on like a 1 through 7 scale, I just said how I was feeling at that moment. And then this is actually me graphing the average levels. So you see how I kind of am grumpy in the morning and get happy at night.
But you were happy. You're most happiest to look like at 5 in the morning.
Yeah, it's that funny thing where it's either, I think it's like between 4 and 5, because that's either me staying out till 4 or having to wake up at 5. Very different.
Yeah, you're having to do neither. And then you don't appear to be a morning person, really, at least in the early
Nope. Not at all.
And energy, how do you measure energy, your own energy? Just subjectively?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously, happiness and energy, both subjective. And that was interesting to me because I, was sort of aware that at some points I'd be happier, sadder, and have more or less energy. But it turns out that my happiness and energy levels were pretty correlated. And when I was just feeling energetic, then I also happened to be happy. And I don't know, that was a cool thing to see. I wasn't really aware of it before starting the project.
We've got some, here's your caffeine consumption.
Yep. I also did this project while I was in college, so it's sort of broken up by class chunks and me drinking a lot of coffee in the middle.
That looks like a huge, well, that's not each day, though.
Oh, no, that's over 50.
Yeah, 50 days.
Yeah.
And next, I think we have more, what's that?
Oh, this is just an example of the graphs that were produced for each day. So that's the happiness and energy in pink. And then I also recorded when I was drinking caffeine, when I was drinking alcohol, when I ate, and the gray boxes when I sleep.
So, and a cursory look at that graph suggests that as soon as you start getting into the alcohol, your energy and happiness drop.
Actually, it goes up.
Oh, no, wait. Well,
the happiness tends to go up, the energy drops. That's true.
So eventually you're hysterically happy and almost unconscious.
I think that's fair.
And okay, great, meals. And what do the vertical lines represent here?
These are just time slices, and it's not even really breakfast, lunch, or dinner, but just the first, second, and third, if I get to a third.
When you have them?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay, so you had a breakfast there at 4:30 in the afternoon one day?
College.
At least you can discriminate breakfast from lunch, more or less, from dinner. So, okay, let me throw out an idea that this author that I referenced has come up with. And she argues that the growing trend for people to wear a pedometer, have a computer program that at the end of the day tells them how much time they spend at the computer, all this stuff, is actually an attempt to kind of take a step back and get in closer touch with oneself. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but also with nature and the physical world and everything else, like not to be removed digitally. Do you buy that argument?
I do. I mean, well, yes and no. I'm really happy that I did that project for 50 days, but at the end of 50 days, I also was very happy to stop because I, wasn't having to check in every hour. But it was really interesting to me because it allowed some introspection into how I was feeling each day. And I think other people can get that from meditation or keeping a diary or something like that. But for me, it was really helpful to have those numbers and to have a graph and to really see like a personal history of those 50 days.
Did you change your behavior as a result?
No, but I wasn't setting out to change my behavior. I just more wanted to know sort of what was going on in my life.
Now, Rachel's done more than this, and we got a couple of quick examples. So I think the next one is Museum of Modern Art.
Yeah, so there was a show curated by Paola Antonelli, and the show is called Talk to Me, and it was basically looking at the connection between people and objects and how there's a discourse between those two sets. So we were at Stamen Design, was asked to create the website for this, and we had a real challenge because we wanted to have individual pages for each piece, but also provide people with a way to sort of explore the other pieces in the show. And so we wound up doing a very large sort of ranking algorithm where each piece, we're looking, the curator actually grouped them by categories and tags. So this one was in the city category with maps, networks, visualization. So each of those had a point value, and then if the authors knew each other on Twitter, then we'd assign a higher point value to that. And sort of summing all that up allowed you to kind of navigate between different projects. So you'll see the very large project on this one in the lower right is a piece by another Stamen person called Walking Papers. Sorry, the person who's doing this is also Aaron Straub-Cope, author of Pretty Maps, who was used to work at Stamen. So yeah, I really love this project. I think it's a really fun way to explore a museum collection, you know, after you go and you maybe want to see, like, learn more about what you were seeing that day.
And one final one about the video awards.
Oh yeah, MTV Video Music Awards. These are really fun projects. So these are Twitter trackers, and the goal is to be looking at who's talking about whom on Twitter throughout the show. So it's kind of a fun thing to leave up as the Media Music Awards are going on, and you can see like celebrities coming on stage and everyone talking about them on Twitter. The big event that year was Beyonce's Baby Bump. That's when she announced that. So that's why she's huge.
Fantastic. And so you're continuing on with projects like this, but going on in the future.
Yeah, certainly doing a lot of work with Meshu. We're doing at Stamen, there's another, I guess I can talk about this. There's another project with Facebook that's launching in the next couple of days, so more introspection and social networks and virality.
Great. It's fascinating, again, stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rachel Binks, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, I think we have the winner of the jelly bean estimating contest, Marianne. Oh, well. Two people were very close. How do you like that? I'll name you nonetheless because you were very close. Dave Scarf, you guessed 7,600. Chris Perry, you guessed 7,062. You were both very close. But the winner of the best data visualizer in this room, Roy Justice, 7,268. Roy, come on up. Tell you that Roy not only gets all the jelly beans, but there's something else in there which we're not going to reveal to the general public, but it is a secret treat for being a really great data visualizer. So congratulations again, Roy. That's really great. And now it's time to hear from our friend John Rennie again. Let's just, I don't even know what John's going to talk about, so let's just turn him on and see what he has to say.
Oppa Gangnam Style. Gangnam Style. 보이지만 볼 땐 노는 여자.
Hi, Jay. Sorry. Sorry, I was just practicing my Gangnam style dancing to Korean pop music. As you know, I'm all about the K-pop. You know, that Gangnam style video has really been a giant global viral hit, much to the envy of a lot of people in the music industry, who of course, really for as long as there's been pop music, have been desperately wishing they could figure out a formula to guarantee ways of making new pop hits. Nobody's ever managed to do that, of course, and I guess all music lovers should be appreciative of that fact. But that doesn't mean that people haven't actually found some astonishing ways to mathematically analyze music in the hopes of trying to figure out what does make it popular. There was a really interesting example of this that came up not too long ago with some work out of Rutgers University by a pair of guys named Sean Ellis and Thomas Engelhardt. They decided to quantify various characteristics of a lot of songs, in fact all of the songs that had made it into the popular music charts in the recent decades, to see just what might be the trends within all of that. Take a look at this visualization that they managed to put together. Now on this you'll see that the x-axis is the position on the sales charts where each song peaked, and the y-axis is the number of weeks that song was on the charts. The color of each circle represents a song's tempo. Blue is fast, green is medium, a yellow is slow. Now, one interesting thing that Ellis and Engelhardt discovered was that really fast-paced songs, kind of to my surprise, they really never seem to make it to the very top of the charts very long. In fact, in the entire 90s, there was only one song that they classified as fast-paced that actually made it into the top 10. That was Shania Twain's The Way You Love Me. Even back in the disco era, fast-paced songs, well, only 3 of them made it into the top 10 during that time. Kind of surprising. So I guess one lesson there for any would-be music stars is, well, you might want to pull back on the tempo a little bit if you really want to have a super hit. And, well, listen, all of this stuff just makes me want to get back to my K-pop. Jay, maybe you and Trevor are inspired in other directions? Hey!
Well, as a matter of fact, we are, and here's why. So that study that John referred to showed that 80% of the Billboard Top 100 hits from 1960 to 2010 were in a major key, 135 beats per minute, and chord progression 1, 3, 4, and structure verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. So just to illustrate the point that might surprise some of you, that data is not all important and not determinate, and that variations from the norm can be successful, we've come up not only with a hit song that defies all of that formula, because it's 104 beats per minute, it's verse, chorus, it's in a minor key, but we've also subtly altered it to fit this crowd. Now, what more could one ask? And in fact, not just to suit this crowd, but as you're going to see, to involve it. So, should I name it? No, I'm not going to name it.
We don't need no data transfer. We don't need no firewall. No dark sarcasm on the hotline. IT, leave my drive alone. Hey, IT, leave my drive alone. All in all, it's just another breach in the wall. All in all, it's just another breach in the wall. Are you ready to help us sing, ladies? All right. Here we go. We don't need no data transfer. We don't need no firewall. No dark sarcasm on the hotline. I leave my drive alone. Hey, IT, leave that drive alone. All in all, it's just another breach in the wall. All in all, it's just another breach in the wall. The lovely ladies of Siberia.
Our next guest on the Cyber Summit talk show, the mayor of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Brad Woodside. Please welcome Brad Woodside.
Hey, what do I do now?
It is a hard act to follow. So, I
Before
recently...
we start, let me tell you,
Sure.
I've been a fan of yours ever since I was a young child.
In situations like this, it's better not to say anything, really. So before we talk, I just want to say, I moved to Alberta relatively recently from Toronto, and in Toronto, the word mayor actually means something different than in the rest of this country. You, sir, who's been watching me since you were a child, I presume that it's a little bit different in Fredericton.
It's
How's
a
that
lot
for a leading
different.
question?
It's a lot different in Fredericton.
So tell me about why are you, the mayor of Fredericton, attending a cyber summit?
Well, because I believe in information technology and connectivity. I believe that broadband is a right that every Canadian should have, not just a few. It's the way of the future, and you're either on the train or you're going to be standing back at the station. It's that important to me. I don't charge people in my municipality to walk on sidewalks. They shouldn't be charged to use the internet.
Good. Are you unusual among Canadian or North American mayors in thinking that way?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Fredericton has twice been an top 7 intelligence city of the world, and that's by design. We've worked hard at that. We're the first city in Canada to offer free high-speed wireless, the first city in Canada to have fiber optic to every home and business. And that all come out of an economic development strategy years ago by Coopers and Libran, where we asked ourselves, who are we? Where do we want to go? And we wanted to be a smart city. And we've never, ever taken ourselves off that path. And it's now been validated by third parties that, in fact, we made the right decision for all the right reasons, and we're enjoying the fruits of our labor.
So you've mentioned a couple of things like free wireless and so on. Can you give me a sense of, if I were a citizen of Fredericton, how different my life might be because of these policies that you've put forward?
Well, the first thing that's going to happen, if you want wireless, they're not going to charge you $14 a night like most hotels do, which is ridiculous. What happens is you can park yourself on a bench and have free high-speed wireless anywhere in the city of Fredericton. How we did that was, back years ago, Bell and Rogers, in terms of Fredericton, were non-competitive. We're trying to attract people to our city, but we don't have a competitive rate. So what we decided to do is start our own telco. We talked to businesses in the university. They thought it was a great idea. They invested in it. I think the city of Fredericton invested $60,000. And they invested in it and paid money up front. And if you take a look at the pipe, there was enough bandwidth left to give it free to everybody. That's what we've done, and it's worked extremely well. And I might add that it has paid for itself. It's not for profit. We invest everything back into the infrastructure to make it even better, and it's given us that title of being the first to offer it free. And that's how I feel about internet and about broadband and about wireless. You shouldn't be charged for it. It's part of doing business. It's part of pleasure. It's part of everything that we do. And that's why we did it.
Now, in many cities, both in the US and Canada, a mayor might be far-seeing, but has to deal with a council that is recalcitrant and not really willing to go along. You've been a mayor there for a long time. Has it been your experience that council always buys into this?
They have. The community has bought into it. I'm not a one-man show. Collectively, we've done it because it's the right thing to do. Bear in mind, Jay, this takes us back to the economic development strategy by Coopers and Lybrand years ago. It was the community that came to the table, all of the stakeholders, and decided, here's our strengths, here's our weaknesses. I'm all about the flavor of the future, not the flavor of the month. I've been in municipal politics long enough to know that if you're talking about something that's good in your community, all of a sudden everybody's talking about it. That's the flavor of the month. I think you should be looking at the flavor of the future. That's where you don't find a whole lot of people. That's where it takes vision. That's where it takes... I'm a dreamer. And you know what? I make dreams come true. But I'm also a realist. But when it comes to information technology, when it comes to broadband, it is a no-brainer. Just unattach yourself for 7 days.
So what do you see in the future? This is what you've done to date in Fredericton. Actually, before I ask you the future question, have you seen companies and individuals come to Fredericton at least partly because of this environment you've established?
Absolutely. Well, we have the NRC is located in Fredericton for research and innovation. We have the largest engineering cluster per capita in Canada. The University of New Brunswick is the first university to offer us a degree in computer science. So those kinds of things, when we looked at those to see who we were and where we were going, was all part of that puzzle that became very, very clear to us in an exercise that involved everybody. So all I had to do was to take all of that information and then champion it outside our community, because we're the last people in the world to think that we're okay. So it's a big sell to the people who actually live in Fredericton. So it really was necessary to have third-party validation. I mean, I knew it. I could feel it. But the community really didn't. So it was a bit of a sell. To try and tell the community, look, we're one of the top intelligent cities of the world. I had to make them believe it.
And the future, where do you see it heading?
Well, you know, you talked about Singularity University, and Singularity is a big thing. And exponentially, it's moving so quickly. Probably while we're talking here, something is going to change in a big way, in a dramatic way. And all I'm thinking of is that train is moving very quickly, and it takes a lot just to hold on, let alone get out of the station and board the train. So I think we have to think outside the box. I really appreciate innovators. I like things happening differently than has been the norm. And I like to attract those kinds of thinkers and those kinds of innovators to Fredericton. And just within the last year, Radian 6, so we're tracking the music awards. You know, Radian 6 and Q1 Labs that IBM, as John's here, has just acquired, sold for like over $500 million. And you know what? They should have held out. They should have held out. It sounds like a lot of money. It's not a lot of money for what those companies were worth. But those are the kinds of things that we're developing in Fredericton. And it's very exciting. It's an exciting way
it is exciting, and I'm sure that most of us here would agree that listening to a far-seeing politician who's made good things happen is, the closest thing to inspirational that politics will ever move me. So thank you very much. Brad,
thanks very much, Jay. Appreciate it.
All been pretty upbeat so far, Harvard Business Review, as we heard earlier, calls data scientists the sexiest job in the 21st century. Big data is making our lives better. But when you read a lot of articles on this, you start to wonder, can we actually keep up with the flood of data, some of which I mentioned earlier? You can't help but think that it might be a challenge. So the Soundbites and I think that we should perhaps sound a slightly dystopian warning along these lines by recreating one of the great songs of the mid-20th century, a song that told the truth about the labors of Sisyphus. There's a joke there because I can't pronounce Sisyphean properly. He rolled up the rock and it kept falling down, and maybe we're looking at that kind of labor issue in big data. The song from the 50s was 16 Tons, a coal mining song. This song is called 16 Gigs. Some people say data's gonna set us free, but there's just too much, you know what I mean? Terabytes, petabytes, just goes on and on. It's still piling up as I'm singing this song. 16 gigs, what do you get? A thumb drive full and that's about it. St. Steve, don't you call me if you only knew I got exabytes to go before I'm through. The morning I was born, well, the sun didn't shine. In those days, people used to work in the mine. They were digging coal, they were mighty proud. But data mining's what I do, living in the cloud. The morning I was born, it was drizzle and rain. I went on to study data, that was my domain. But I never really knew what was in for me. That data's still growing exponentially. Load 16 gigs and what do you get? A thumb drive full and that's about it. St. Steve, don't you call me if you only knew I got exabytes to go before I'm through. If you see me coming, better step aside. I'm gonna get Siberia on my side. Things like broadband's heading my way. A high-speed network's gonna save the day. 16 gigs, what do you get? A thumb drive full and that's about it. St. Steve, don't you call me if you only knew. I got exabytes to go before I'm through.
Jay Ingram on violin.
It's true, isn't it? Okay, we have one more fabulous guest in tonight's talk show. And I think he needs very little introduction, and besides, I don't actually have one prepared. So with that rationalization, please welcome Robin Windsor.
They are a fantastic band, are they not?
This is far and away the most fun I've ever had at a Siberia Summit.
That may or may not be a compliment.
It's a fairly high bar.
So Robin has undertaken what I think is still a fairly unusual thing, and that is he's had his genetic profile prepared by a company called 23andMe, and that's what we're going to talk about, because it's an interesting area of big data. It's an interesting personal area. It's not without conflict and criticism, and I think it's just a really interesting insight into where we might be heading. So it's up to you. How did you decide to do that in the first place?
Well, I'm one of those irritating Singularity graduates, and I came across the profiling. I'd always been interested in it, and when we got down to Singularity, a bunch of folks were getting their genes sequenced, and I just couldn't resist. As it happens, the first time I got my DNA sequenced, we used a company out of Reykjavik, and I too have traveled around Reykjavik. Maybe I should, and I have my wife with me as well, so maybe I should get some earrings made up. But we got
You
to
could wear the earrings, Robin.
We'll talk about that later, Jay. We got the DNA sequenced, first of all, by a company called DecodeMe, which was based out of Reykjavik, which is part of a big gene sequencing move out there. And I got to look at all those sequencers at the University of Reykjavik when I was there a couple of months ago. And it was interesting that they've got lines and lines of machines. The company has effectively gone broke. And they paid a fortune for the sequencers, which are now incredibly cheap, as we were hearing from Andrew the other day. So I've had it done again now through 23andMe, based out of California. Some of the principals are married to the principals of Google, so they're probably fairly well funded. And it's a fun service. Every month I pay a small subscription fee, a couple of bucks. And as they find more and more information about what that DNA sequence means through crowdsourcing, through surveys, then they send me an update and say, gee, we found there's an additional finding from your DNA that tells you this or that.
So did they alert you to the possibility that, you know, I just did a television special where I had my body imaged in a variety of ways. And people were very clear at the beginning to say there are things that we call accidentalomas, that, you know, you might discover something that you didn't know was there and actually really didn't want to be there. Did they warn you in a similar way?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, the basic readout, actually we can pop up a first slide and I can show you what the basic readout looks like.
Yeah, there it is.
So this is me in part, and it tells us information about my risk for various disease, and there's all sorts of things there, from tracing my ancestry to looking at what's there. Now, most of that they're just going to give you once you sign up for the service. It's pretty simple. You spit in the tube, send it off, and it comes back. But some of them are going to be life-altering things. And before they tell you whether or not you've got Huntington's or whether you've got serious risks on Alzheimer's, you actually then have to read a little disclaimer, say, yes, I understand that if I open this, I can't unknow it. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. And so they put a little extra security around the ones that are really going to mess you up a little bit if they turn out nasty.
Were you startled by anything?
I wasn't startled by anything, but I was interested in some of them. If you have a look at the numbers up here, you do have to have a little bit of common sense about the numbers. So if my risk of something that's 1 in a million is 100 times normal, it's still not much. But if you look at my risk up there of prostate cancer, it's actually quite a bit higher than normal. So, you know, that's something I can action. I can make sure that I'm checked regularly, do the PSA tests, and follow up.
Of course, if it had been a heightened risk for Alzheimer's, there really isn't a lot. You could do more crossword puzzles, but that's not going to help.
Yeah, and I play a mean Scrabble game as well, so there you go. But you can get started on AZT a little earlier if you're starting to find some problems, things like that. There's stuff you can do. If we actually pop over onto the next slide, you find that you know, the bad comes with the good as well. There's my risk of Alzheimer's, which is actually less than normal, which is pretty good news.
Second from the top.
Second from the top, which is good because my father had Alzheimer's. So it's nice to see that my risk is reduced. But people say...
and that's quite interesting too, because most people, if one of their parents had Alzheimer's, especially the same gender parent, would, I think, assume that they're at higher risk.
And I did too. And now I don't have to worry about that as much. My attitude on data is get the data, don't stick your head in the sand. I always want to know, and I'm always surprised I shouldn't be because it keeps on happening. How smart am I? I'm always surprised when I come across people who say, I don't want to know this, because I don't see why you wouldn't want to know this, and yet I've met lots of people who don't.
We got a couple more slides, I think.
We do,
yeah, there's one.
But we're sort of jumping away a little bit from that one. This is the output from a sleep monitor, and the sleep monitor is a fairly uninvasive little thing. This is it here. Pop it on at night, you look really cool. Goes with the Superman jammies. And that sends a Bluetooth signal over to my iPhone and records my sleep as an EEG through the night. And this is actionable data.
In what way?
Well, what I found was that I could look at the same roughly 7-hour sleep period, and on this one, I think this one's from January 2nd. So I can switch back for a moment. Sometimes if you listen to me, you'll spot the fact that I'm a Scotsman, and every now and again, it switches back and forth. But in Scotland, there's a 2-day national holiday, not just one at New Year. We call it Hogmanay, and it takes a wee while to recover. So this is relevant to this data from January 2nd. You see, I was sleeping very, very deeply for a while there. Anyway,
I was actually impressed with how much deep sleep you had. That's unusual.
Well, that's the thing. So in 7 hours, in this case, I got lots of deep sleep, and I won't say why. But in another 7 hours, I would find that I would get maybe 6 or 7 minutes of deep sleep, and deep sleep is physically restorative. And what I found was, I'm trying to slip back away from that Scottish accent for a moment.
And you're having difficulty.
I'm having a wee bit of difficulty, yeah, there you go. What I found was that if my last email went out at, say, 7 or 8 p.m., and I got a couple of hours of watching TV, unwinding, reading a book, or whatever, then I would get a couple of hours of deep sleep. If my last email goes out at about 11 p.m., just before I go to sleep, then I'm going to get about 6 or 7 minutes in that same 7 hours. That's interesting, and that's actionable. It means that I've really got to try and unhook a couple of hours before I go to sleep if I want to get any quality sleep.
I'm sorry, I didn't really want to jump away from the 23andMe data because I wanted to ask you if now having the data in your hands, and as you pointed out, some of it is actionable, but most of it isn't. Mm-hmm. Do you just kind of put it in a drawer and forget about it?
You basically set aside some concerns, like the Alzheimer's, but it's useful going forward for other things as we discover more and more traits. The question is, one of the questions that comes out from it, though, is whether or not whether or not I'm smart by sharing this. I'm told that if I lived in the United States, I would be a lot less free with sharing it, where the insurance companies can come in. But do I have the right to share this information? It's my information, but my son and daughter could say, hey, Dad, stop sharing that information because you're giving people about a 50% chance of knowing what our information is. But it's still my information. So should I be able to share it? I think I should.
But, and with these, do the updates, have you found so far that monthly updates or periodic updates?
Periodic updates as they come up with a new finding.
Actually change anything materially or simply refine data that you already had a pretty good idea about?
Mostly it's little stuff. The other month I discovered that I'm not likely to sneeze if I look at the sun. I kind of already knew that. Been looking at it for, quite a few years.
Yeah. Hey, we got one more slide. What's this again is different.
Yeah, this one's different as well, because I'm looking at sort of taking it in a whole package, which is called the quantified self movement, and I wear a little pedometer. So I've got a little guy here on my belt, and it tells me how many steps I took each day. That's not terribly interesting in and of itself unless you record it. And so this, as soon as I get within Bluetooth range of my home computer, it uploads that data, and I can look at the graph. I can see how active I am. Obviously, I'm getting a little more exercise on the weekends.
Okay,
but if I correlate this with my genetic profile...
Do you have other devices on your body that you're going to show us?
No,
well, I mean, you've brought out 2 already in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, and Rachel referred to this earlier too, and I'm fascinated by this apparent move for people to generate a whole bunch of data about their life. And I have to confess, I don't really get it, because I think if I'm not fit, I probably know that. If I'm not getting enough sleep, I probably know that. So what is the value of quantifying it?
Well, some of the things are hidden things. Some of the things like the Alzheimer's risk or the prostate cancer are things that I wouldn't know otherwise. The relationship between my work habits and the value of the sleep that I get, rather than just quantity, it's a matter of quality. And that's true of all data, by the way. It hasn't come up much at the conference, but we've been talking a lot about quantity, but quality is a big issue too. Those are things that I wouldn't know, and the correlations between them. One of the, I'll tell somebody else's story briefly. I heard the story of a team member from the Mars rover project who became debilitatingly ill for no apparent reason. And through monitoring her own health with many of these devices, discovered that she had an allergy to tomatoes cooked in a particular cast iron skillet. And the combination of the two things messed her up. So she was able to read from all these devices the impact on her health and return to health, which no regular test was going to do. Andrew talked a little bit about the age of personalized medicine that's coming along. We can all get ahead of it a little bit because there's a lot of personal data. And if we all collect this, the amount from this is trivial, but the amount from DNA sequencing is not trivial, especially once we start getting into full genome sequencing. And that's going to make a big, big impact on the amount of data that we see being shared, being correlated, because once you've got this, then you want to know, hey, how does that correlate with my children's? How does that correlate with my aunts or uncles? And you can take it further. Like if you run to the next slide on this one, you'll see what the genetic profile in terms of ancestry. In this case, I picked somebody more interesting than me. This is from somebody, a Uyghur woman, so from northern China, I guess. And you can see all the different components that make up her background and ancestry. If you run it forward one slide, you'll see a really boring one, which is me. And there you go. I'm just... But again, you take a look at me and you can say, yeah, pretty much Northern European, and we can see where this guy comes from. But yeah, so that's why I gave you a more interesting one. Not a surprise, but then you start correlating. The service then lets you tag to anybody that might be a second, third, fourth, or fifth cousin. So suddenly, you then take this, you correlate it with your ancestry.ca, your family tree gets populated, and you've got all sorts of relatives. I actually don't really care about the relatives, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, and maybe you're changing you and Rachel together have changed my mind about this a bit. But we'll see. Thank you, Robin. Thanks very much.
Retail value of it's a few $100, and as Robin I think eloquently put it, you can learn a lot of interesting information from that. Now, We have a bit of a ticket peculiarity, which might actually make it look like two people have won when I announce the number, because it's possible that two of you have the same number. But we are ruthlessly going to whittle that number down from 2, in case it is 2, to 1. So here we go. Okay, here's the winning number. The winning number for the free genetic profile from the Jay and John Talk Show at the Siberia Summit is number 44. Do we have a winner? All right. Do we have 2 winners? And his name is Dan, not number 44. Let's have a big hand for Dan. Wow. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us close to the end of the Jay and John Talk Show. Do you know what I failed to do? And I apologize, and I certainly apologize to John Rennie, who is in his dank, palmetto bug-infested room in Miami, because I forgot to cue his little video about DNA, but I think it would be a perfect ending. So if John Rennie's ready, let's hear again from John one last time.
Oh, Jay, don't you miss the old days when DNA was so simple? Yeah, we just thought DNA was the code book of life. Biologists used to dream that if they just knew what all of the genes in the DNA were, well, we'd know everything we needed to know to understand how life worked. And that's, of course, what inspired the big International Human Genome Project, in which they undertook to get a sequence of all of our human DNA. To understand how ambitious that is, you have to realize that if you took all 46 of our chromosomes and you took the DNA out of that, and you then managed to string all of that DNA together into one long piece of DNA, you'd end up with a 6-foot-long double helical strand of DNA. It's a kind of amazingly large amount of material when you realize that this has to be packed inside every single cell in our bodies. That's 3 billion DNA subunits to go through. But of course, what helped to make that a lot more manageable was the realization that it's not actually all doing something. At least that seemed to be the case. Out of all of this material, really only 1 or 2% of it, basically only about this much, seems to be in the business of encoding the information for proteins. All the rest of this stuff was what they were calling junk DNA, and it seemed like it was largely irrelevant for our purposes. So this was great. This was what we really had to focus our attention on. And yet, even though the sequencing technology that we have available to us today makes it very easy for us to start to even have just personal genomes sequenced, we're not making progress as fast as we would have liked, because all of this is turning out to be a lot more complicated than we'd figured. One problem is that even inside this little protein encoding piece, well, it's not the case that just one gene makes one protein. Some of the information can be moved around and used in different ways to make more than one protein, so that adds complications. But the real complexity comes from the fact that all of this other stuff, this so-called junk DNA, not junk at all. Yes, in fact, it seems to be quite active. Recently, there were some publications by a big multi-institutional project called ENCODE that looked at this and determined that more than 80% of this, possibly all of it, is actually in the process of making RNA much of the time. Now, what's that mean? Well, we don't even really know. In fact, a lot of it probably is just worthless gibberish and it's not doing anything in the cell, but we do know for a fact that some of it is actually making RNA molecules that then come back down and influence the expression of the genetic information in the little protein-making piece. So all of this stuff is actually intimately bound up with this part of it. And all of it is still hugely complicated. So even though we're making real progress in trying to understand DNA, the fact is every time we make that progress, it just seems to further reveal how our genome is even more complicated than we thought in the first place. And it's all a horrible tangle. So I ask you, Jay, don't you miss the old days when DNA just seemed so simple?
So our thanks to everybody that took part tonight. Andrew Hessel, Rachel Binks, Brad Woodside, Robin Windsor, John Rennie, Trevor.
Jay Ingram.
Nah. I'm just standing here. And how about the band?
Garth is playing Sesame Street right now, just in case no one noticed that. These are the people in your neighborhood. So just wanted to say thanks so much for sticking around at the Siberia Cyber Summit, the Jay and John Talk Show. Thanks so much for spending your evening with us here at the BAM Center. We came out from Calgary today to be with you. We just want to say a quick thanks to all the staff that made this happen here. Darcy, Blair, Rob, John, Megan. I hope I haven't missed anybody. Thanks so much for turning this lecture hall into a rock and roll concert. It's heroic what you did tonight. Thank you. And of course to Marianne Moser and all the lovely Siberia singers and dancers. There's an epidemic of good-looking people at Siberia. Do you want to know who these guys are? Back there on the keyboards, Garth Kennedy. That's his mustache playing the piano, by the way. Playing the bass guitar the way it's supposed to be played, sideways, Josip Vulic. Holding down the lead guitar to my right, Mr. Steve Dodd. Drummers never get any credit, but we need them so bad. This is Rob Vulic on the drums. My name is Trevor Day. I'm from Mount Royal University in Calgary. Thank you so much for coming. Jay Ingram.
And just one final thought before we go. What we've heard tonight and what you've heard all day, yesterday and tomorrow, proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that big data is truly a revolution.
Well, you know, we all want to change the world. You're going to dance once. Evolution, well, you know, we all want to change the world. But if you're talking data transfer, don't you know you can count me out? You know it's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. Alright. And now you say you got a real solution. Well, you know, we all love to see the plan. Shoo-be-doo-ah, oh, shoo-be-doo-ah. You asked me for a on storage on the network cloud. We're gonna tell you what you can download. You know it's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. It's gonna be alright. If you line up for the iPhone 5, you will never be satisfied. You know it's gonna be alright.